Peace is something almost everyone is searching for. The strange part is, most of us are looking in the wrong place. We search for it in better circumstances: a better job, a healthier relationship, more money, more certainty. We tell ourselves that once life settles down, peace will naturally follow. It's an idea that feels completely logical. If the things causing us pain disappear, surely peace will take their place. I believed that for a long time. I thought peace was waiting somewhere on the other side of change. If people became who I hoped they would become, if promises were finally kept, if difficult seasons came to an end, if life became fair, then I could finally exhale. But peace never arrived, because peace was never waiting in the future. It was being quietly stolen in the present, not all at once, through hundreds of ordinary moments, a conversation that lingered in my mind long after it ended, a phone call that changed the direction of my entire day, a message that followed me into the evening, someone else's choices slowly becoming the center of my emotional world. Without ever deciding to, I had given other people permission to determine whether I felt calm or anxious, whether I slept peacefully, whether I smiled, whether I carried hope or disappointment into tomorrow. I wasn't simply living my own life anymore. I was emotionally living everyone else's too. The unsettling thing about losing your peace is that it rarely feels dramatic. It feels gradual. No one wakes up one morning and decides to surrender themselves. It happens one compromise at a time, one excuse, one more chance, one more conversation, one more reason to believe tomorrow will finally be different. Eventually, something begins to change inside us. We stop asking, "Is this healthy?" and start asking, "Can I survive one more day?" Survival has a way of lowering our expectations without asking our permission. The human mind is incredibly adaptable. We adapt to noise until silence feels unfamiliar. We adapt to chaos until calm feels uncomfortable. We adapt to disappointment until expecting less feels like wisdom. Then, somewhere along the way, adaptation becomes identity. We stop noticing what's happening because it simply becomes who we believe we are. That's the part that frightens me the most. Not that people can lose themselves, but that they can lose themselves without ever noticing it's happening. I became incredibly good at reading other people. I could sense tension before anyone spoke. I could walk into a room and immediately feel whether something was wrong. Who needs reassurance? Who's upset? What should I say? What shouldn't I say? How do I keep today from becoming another difficult day? I became so good at reading everyone else that I slowly became a stranger to myself. If someone had asked me how another person was feeling, I probably could have answered. If they had asked me how I was feeling, I'm not sure I would have known. There are people listening to this who understand exactly what I mean. You've become fluent in everyone else's emotions. You know when someone is disappointed before they admit it. You know when someone is withdrawing before they say a word. You know when someone is about to explode before anyone else notices. But when someone gently asks, "How are you?" you hesitate. Not because you don't have feelings, because you've spent so long monitoring everyone else's inner world that you've stopped listening to your own. I don't think this happens because we're weak. I think it happens because we care deeply. People with kind hearts often make one quiet mistake. They confuse love with responsibility. If someone is hurting, they believe they should fix it. If someone is angry, they assume they've done something wrong. If someone keeps making destructive choices, they convince themselves that loving harder might finally change the outcome. It's a beautiful way to love, but it's an exhausting way to live. Because there will always be pain you cannot heal for someone else, decisions you cannot make for them, lessons they have to learn without you carrying them. Somewhere along the way, I stopped measuring love by connection. I started measuring it by how much I was willing to carry. The more exhausted I became, the more convinced I was that I must be loving well. I thought sacrifice and love were the same thing. They aren't. Love can involve sacrifice. But when sacrifice slowly erases your identity, it stops being love. It becomes survival. No one asked me to abandon myself. I became so focused on holding everyone else together that I slowly came apart. From the outside, this often looks admirable. People call it patience, loyalty, kindness, strength. They praise the person who's always understanding, always available, always willing to give another chance. What they don't see is the quiet cost, the conversations that never leave your mind, the endless replaying, the constant analyzing, the invisible weight of believing your happiness depends on someone else's choices. That isn't peace, it's captivity, the kind where the door isn't locked, yet you no longer believe you're free to leave. And I think that's one of the saddest places a person can find themselves, not because they've lost their peace, but because they've forgotten it was ever theirs to protect. The moment everything began to change wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a conversation that suddenly answered every question. There wasn't a morning where I woke up feeling completely different. It happened so quietly that I almost missed it. One day, in the middle of all the thinking, all the hoping, all the trying to hold everything together, a question came to mind that I had never asked before. Why have I made my peace dependent on things I have no control over? I couldn't control another person's addiction. I couldn't control whether someone chose honesty over excuses. I couldn't control whether people kept their promises. I couldn't control whether someone truly understood my heart. Yet somehow I had convinced myself that my ability to feel peaceful depended on all of those things happening. That's an impossible way to live. Because if your peace depends on another person's decisions, you've unknowingly handed them the keys to your emotional life. I couldn't choose everything that happened to me, but I could choose who I became because of it. That changed everything. I stopped asking, how do I change them? And I started asking, how do I become someone who isn't constantly shaken by things I cannot control? Those are completely different questions. One keeps your eyes fixed on someone else's life. The other quietly brings you back to your own. I realized peace isn't found when life becomes predictable. It's found when your identity no longer depends on what life does next. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can remain comfortable. It doesn't require you to abandon your peace to prove your loyalty. It doesn't ask you to carry burdens that were never yours to carry. That's when I began to understand boundaries differently. For a long time, I believed boundaries pushed people away. Now I believe they protect what is healthy enough to stay. Without boundaries, compassion slowly becomes resentment, trust becomes fear, joy becomes exhaustion, and eventually, love becomes obligation. My prayers changed. I stopped asking God to make every circumstance easier. Instead, I found myself praying, help me become the kind of person who remains peaceful, even when life isn't. That prayer changed me more than asking for perfect circumstances ever could. Because peace isn't built by controlling tomorrow. It's built by trusting the one who already holds tomorrow. There is an incredible freedom in accepting that not every problem belongs to you. Not every argument deserves your response. Not every misunderstanding requires your explanation. Not every burden belongs on your shoulders. Some things become lighter the moment you stop carrying them. Life still isn't perfect. Difficult seasons still come. What changed was me. Peace was never the absence of storms. Peace was knowing the storm no longer had permission to define my identity. Protecting your peace doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean loving people less. Sometimes it means loving wisely. Sometimes it means stepping back instead of stepping in. Sometimes it means allowing people to face the consequences of their own choices instead of rescuing them from every fall. And sometimes, protecting your peace means forgiving someone who may never apologize, not because they've earned it, but because you deserve to be free. I've come to believe that peace is one of God's greatest gifts, not because it removes every storm, but because it reminds us that our anchor doesn't have to move every time the waves do. If someone had told me years ago that peace would become one of the most valuable things I would ever possess, I would have assumed they meant life would eventually become peaceful. That's not what happened. Life didn't suddenly become quieter. I did. And once I stopped expecting other people to protect what only I was responsible for protecting, everything began to change. So if there's one thought I hope stays with you after this video, it's this. Your peace is precious. Not because life will never ask something of you, but because every single day, life will invite you to trade it for something else, someone else's approval, someone else's choices, someone else's healing. Don't. Peace isn't something you finally discover at the end of a perfect life. It's something you protect through every ordinary day, every difficult conversation, every boundary, every prayer, every decision. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the life you were trying so desperately to build began the moment you stopped giving your peace away.